guy built a wrestling empire worth millions on pure chaos and fear. He was a complete genius and literally the most hated man in Detroit. But the one thing that made him a superstar is the exact same thing that burned his entire kingdom to the ground. This is the insane story of NWA Detroit's rise and total collapse. Before hardcore wrestling was even a thing, there was the Sheik. Forget chair shots you see today. This guy, Ed Farhat, invented a style so violent it literally started riots. This wasn't normal wrestling, this was terrifying, and the city of Detroit could not get enough of it. Born in Michigan, this WW2 vet found his real mission in the wrestling ring. He wasn't the biggest dude, but his ideas for causing chaos were on another level. He created the Sheik, a wild man from the Syrian desert, a character he played with scary intensity. The Sheik didn't give speeches, he would just mumble and point at the sky. People believed he was in a trance, felt zero pain, and was scared of nothing. To fans in the 60s, this was 100% real. In 1964, Farhat did something incredible. He took over the struggling Detroit wrestling territory, getting the keys to the brand new Cobo Arena. He didn't just buy a promotion, he bought an entire kingdom. His plan was simple: make everyone hate him as much as humanly possible. He wanted people to spend their money just for the tiny chance to see someone beat him up. He was basically running a public exorcism every single week, and he was the demon. And his secret weapons? They were actually insane. He'd use hidden pencils to cut up his opponent's foreheads, a trick that backfired so much his own face was covered in scars. And his finisher? He would spit a giant fireball into his opponent's face. Can you even imagine seeing that? The line between the show and reality was so thin that fans would pull actual weapons on him. This was the chaos the Sheik wanted, and it was how he built his entire empire. So now the Sheik owned the place, and guess who he made the star of the show? Himself! His company, Big Time Wrestling, was all about him. The main event was always the Sheik, this unbeatable monster, versus an endless line of heroes who tried, and failed, to stop him. His biggest rivalry ever was with a guy named Bobo Brazil. Bobo was the complete opposite of the Sheik. He was a hero everyone loved, super strong, and the absolute soul of working-class Detroit. In a city with major racial tension, especially after the 1967 riots, their fights were electric. Bobo was the people's hero, and the Sheik was the monster. Their fights at Cobo Arena were legendary. The plan was simple, but it worked every time. The Sheik would absolutely destroy Brazil with every dirty trick, cutting him up, choking him, spitting fire. But Bobo always fought back with his signature move, a headbutt so powerful it could crush bone. They sold out the 12,000-seat Cobo Arena over and over, with fans begging to see their hero finally win. It wasn't just a rivalry, it was a massive phenomenon in Detroit. And how did they get so many people to show up? A weekly TV show, Big Time Wrestling. This show was basically a 60-minute highlight reel of the Sheik's latest crimes, all designed to sell tickets for the next Cobo Arena show, and it worked perfectly. The show went everywhere, making Big Time Wrestling a regional powerhouse and a giant money-making machine. The Sheik was obsessed with making people believe he was real. He almost never spoke in public as himself. If you called his house and asked for Ed, they'd say, "No Ed lives here." He would show up to arenas, roll out a prayer rug, and pretend to go into a trance, ignoring everyone. This made him one of the most believable and hated bad guys in history. To the fans, he wasn't playing a part, he was the Sheik. His influence was huge. He trained his nephew, who became the hardcore icon Sabu, passing his insane style to a new generation. The Sheik is basically the godfather of hardcore wrestling. ECW would later get famous using his ideas. By the early 1970s, NWA Detroit was on top of the world. The Sheik was the most feared man in wrestling, and the city of Detroit was completely under his control. But here's where it all starts to go wrong. The one rule that made NWA Detroit so successful was the exact same rule that would destroy it. The Sheik could never, ever lose for real. Ed Farhat the booker had one single rule. Ed Farhat the wrestler is the only star. He booked himself as champion an incredible 12 times. But it wasn't just that he always won, it was how he won. Clean losses basically never happened. Every single main event at Cobo Arena ended in total chaos. He'd get disqualified, or the other guy would get counted out, or he'd just spit a fireball in their face. He would do literally anything to protect his character. For a while, this was awesome. Fans packed the arena thinking, "This is the night. Someone has to beat him." He brought in the biggest wrestling stars in the world, like Dusty Rhodes and Terry Funk, but they all just got fed to the Sheik to make him look even stronger. Terry Funk himself said the Sheik would use his power as the boss to bury younger talent just for his own benefit. The entire company only existed to serve its king. But after a while, this got so boring. Fans went from being desperate to see him lose to realizing it was never, ever going to happen. The same cheap endings week after week got old. The insane heat that filled arenas just disappeared. Why would you buy a ticket if you already know the ending is going to be a letdown? The Sheik's greatest power, being unbeatable, became his biggest weakness. They stopped creating new stars because nobody was ever allowed to beat the main guy. The roster got stale, and the stories were just the same thing over and over. The Sheik was so focused on protecting himself that he completely forgot to build a future for his company. The violence was still there, the blood was still there, but the excitement was gone. The once guaranteed sellout crowds started to get smaller and smaller. The Empire's foundation was cracking. The end of NWA Detroit wasn't one big explosion. It was a slow and painful death. The boring booking was already killing the company, but then a perfect storm of problems hit. First, rival promoters started moving in. A company called the NWA began running shows in the Sheik's territory, and they had new wrestlers and, most importantly, different endings to their shows. Fans who were tired of the Sheik's act now had somewhere else to go. Then, the Sheik's money problems got really bad. He got a reputation for paying his wrestlers almost nothing, so even big stars who brought in huge crowds complained they weren't getting paid. The crowds kept getting smaller, and he got forced out of the massive Cobo Arena into tiny, less impressive venues. His empire was literally shrinking before his eyes. But the final nail in the coffin was television. The big-time wrestling TV show was the heart of the entire company. It's how he sold all his tickets. But as his debts got bigger, he fell behind on payments to the TV station. In 1980, they canceled his show. Without TV, the promotion was completely invisible. His weekly commercial for Chaos was gone. With no TV and an alienated fan base, it was over. In 1980, after 16 years, big-time wrestling quietly folded. The guy who was one of wrestling's biggest draws had to declare bankruptcy and even sell his house. The fearsome, unbeatable Sheik was now wrestling on the independent circuit, a ghost of what he used to be. He'd even find work in Japan doing the brutal death matches his style inspired, and got severely burned in one insane flaming barbed wire match. But his Detroit empire was gone forever. So what are we supposed to think of the Sheik, Ed Farhat? It's complicated. On one hand, he was a total pioneer, a genius who, with guys like Abdullah the Butcher, basically wrote the book on hardcore wrestling. You can see his fingerprints all over ECW in the Attitude Era. For all of that, he was put in the WWE Hall of Fame. But he was also a promoter whose ego was so huge it suffocated his entire company. In his mission to be an unbeatable monster, he forgot the #1 rule of storytelling. Eventually, the monster has to lose. He built a kingdom, made himself king, and then basically burned the whole thing to the ground rather than share the spotlight. The rise of NWA Detroit was meteoric, built on a revolutionary idea. Its fall was just as dramatic, a brutal lesson in how one person's ego can destroy an entire empire. If you enjoyed this look back at wrestling history, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the squared circle. And let us know in the comments, who do you think is the greatest wrestling villain of all time? Thanks for watching.